The first question we have is from Suresh Kumar. Plants and animals don't accumulate karma, rather, they spend karma. However, only human beings identifying with a separate individual self accumulate more karma. Therefore, human beings need to understand the real purpose of human birth, to remove ignorant ignorance by unrealizing the unrealized. Is this understanding correct?
Yes, I think it is often said in certain sastras that only in the human birth we can do agamya, but other forms of birth, in animal birth and so on, um, is for just for experiencing prarabdha. How much truth there is in this, I honestly don't know. This may be said just to impress upon us the importance of not wasting this opportunity we have. Certainly, in a human birth, we have advantages that we wouldn't have in other births. Again, another thing that is said, I don't know how true this is, but animals are not aware of three states like we are. Animals, they don't distinguish between waking and dream. It all seems to be one to them. So it is sometimes said animals are always in a dreamlike state. And it is said that devas, the heavenly beings, they never sleep. So the fact that in human birth we are clearly aware of three distinct states, this is a definite advantage in the spiritual path. How much truth there is in all these things, I honestly don't know, because so many explanations are given in sastras. Explanations are given to suit the one to whom they're addressed. So not all explanations are, I mean, explanations that may seem true in one context may not seem true in another context. But truly speaking, we need not be concerned about these things. Our aim is to find out who am I. Now, whether we have such an opportunity in other births need not concern us, because that's thinking about things other than ourselves. We need to investigate ourselves. That means we need to focus our attention on ourselves. It is certainly not impossible to attain mukti in other life forms. A very clear example is Pasu Lakshmi, Cow Lakshmi. Bhagavan very clearly indicated that she had attained liberation. So it is possible, but these things need not concern us, because now we have taken a human birth. Let's take advantage of this human birth and not worry about whether we could do the same if we had taken birth in some other form. The important thing is, who am I here and now? Other talking about other species and so on, these are ultimately just academic questions. They don't in any way contribute to our knowing what we actually are. So my attitude to all such things is, it may be true, may not be true. What does it matter to us? Bhagavan has taught us, has shown us the way. If we are wise, we will follow the path he has shown us to the best of our ability. That's all that matters.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, that is the only question we have so far.
Okay.
So I will ask a question then. So
Right.
I've heard some people say that ego is in the Vijnanamaya Kosha. But according to Bhagavan, as in Ulladu Narpadu, he says Udal Panchakosha, the term body is composed of, like, its meaning
Yeah.
means all five koshas. And also he says when ego arises, everything arises. Meaning ego is more far subtler than Vijnanamaya Kosha, and maybe that is the closest to the being, pure self. That is the first thing that arises. So please let us know your comments on that. Like some people say, like when we die, we carry our intellect along with ego.
Yes.
Yeah.
Generally, in Shastras, it is said when we die, when we leave the gross body, what goes from one life to another is a subtle body. However, the term subtle body has different meanings in different contexts. In the subtle body is sometimes 3 of the 5 sheaths are referred to as the subtle body. That is the pranamaya kosha, manomaya kosha, and vijnanamaya kosha, the life, the mind, and the intellect. These are sometimes referred to as the subtle body. But when it is said that the subtle body is what survives and goes from one life to another, it is not referring to these 3 sheaths. And that is why in verse 24 of Ulajunapadu, when Bhagavan says, Jada Udulnanenadu, the insentient body does not say I. In other words, the body is not aware of itself as I. And their body clearly refers to all the 5 sheaths, not just the physical form of the body. All the 5 sheaths are Jada, as he makes clear also in verse 22 of Upadesha. And so he, as I say, in verse 24 of Ulutanapi, he begins by saying, Jadudul Nanenadu. The insentient body does not say I. That means that implies all the 5 sheaths have no awareness, because they're jada, so they have no awareness, therefore they are not aware I. Satchit Udiyadu. Satchit does not rise. But in between, one thing, I, rises as the extent of a body. Since it rises, it is not Satchit. Since it is, since Bhagavan refers to it as I, that implies it's aware of itself as I. Since it's aware of itself as I, it's not the body. So it's neither the body, that means it's none of the 5 sheaths, nor is it Satchit. It is some spurious entity that rises between these two, binding them together as if they were one. That is, ego is what is aware of itself as I am this body. The awareness I am, that is Satchit. And the body is Jada. So these are different things, but we conflate them, take them as one. And that is why Bhagavan goes on to say, this is Chit Jada Granti. It is the knot that binds together Chit and Jada. Of course, Chit itself is never bound, but in the view of ego, we're aware, but we're aware of ourselves as a body. So the Chit seems to be bound to the body in the view of ego. That is why it's called Chit Jada Granti. So you say Chit Jada Granti, bandham, is bondage, because once we're bound by this conflation of Chit and Jada, that is bondage, that we are tied by that knot, so to speak. Bandham, Jivan. Jivan means the soul, the jiva. Nupame. Nupame means subtle body. Nupame, sorry, I've just forgotten what. Bandham, Jivan, Nupame, Ichamsaram, this samsara. You just get the verse. So I make sure I don't miss anything. Idu Chit Jadagranti, Bandham, Jivan, Nupame, the subtle body, Ahande, ego, Ichamsaram, this samsara, Manam, and mind. So here Bhagavan makes clear that the term subtle body in some context also refers to ego. So when it is said that the subtle body migrates from one life to, well, from one birth to another, it's not referring to 3 of the 5 sheaths, it's referring to ego, which is not any of the 5 sheaths. He also says the same in Nana at the end of the 4th paragraph. He says, Manam epodum or stulate anusarite nikum. The mind stands always going after something gross. That means it's always identifying itself as something gross. In other words, the body, mind, here mind means ego. It cannot stand without identifying a body as I. Taniai niladu. Alone it cannot stand. Separately it cannot stand. And then he goes on to say, Maname sukshma sariramendram jivanendram solapadu kiridu. So again here he says, mind alone is called, is what is called the sukshma sarira, the subtle body, and jiva. So when it is said that jiva, that the subtle body goes from one life to another, it is referring to ego, not to 3 of the 5 sheaves. So we need to be aware that the same term can have different meanings in different contexts. But this is a big confusion. Many people think that these 3 sheaths go from life to life. That is what Bhagavan has. That's why Bhagavan clarified this in 2 places, in Nana and in Uludunapadu. What ego does take with it is the subtlest of the 5 sheaths, namely the Anandamaya Kosha or Karana Sarira. That is all its vasanas. The Anandamaya Kosha consists of nothing but vasanas. In other words, the Anandamaya Kosha is what is otherwise called the chittam, the will. Which the will in its subtlest form consists of all the vasanas, the inclinations. Those inclinations are what give rise to likes and dislikes, raga, dvesha, virupu, verupu. And the likes and dislikes in turn give rise to desires, attachments, hopes, fears, and so on. So in it, the will, the chittam, or the anandamaya kosha in its subtlest form is just the vasanas. That is what ego takes with it from life to life. And those vasanas are the seeds that sprout as everything else. So the ego does take the other sheaths with it, but only in seed form, only in the form of vasanas. Those vasanas are what it then projects in the next life as a new body, a new mind and everything, and a new world and all these things. So I've answered part of your question, but I answered the last part of your question, but I've forgotten now what the beginning of your question was. So can you repeat it?
Yeah, people say that ego is within Vijnanamaya Kosha.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
We can say ego is within all the koshas. That is, certainly ego seems to be within this Annamaya kosha, doesn't it? It seems to be within this physical body. We feel I'm here, not there. I'm inside this body, not outside the body. So ego seems to be within all the 5 sheaths. And the reason they are called sheaths means coverings, because the subtler sheaths seem to be inside the grosser sheath. So the grossest sheath is the Annamaya kosha, the physical body. The life, the prana, is within that. And within that, there's the mind, and within the mind, there's the intellect, and within the intellect, there's the will. And within the will is ego. So it's that's one way of viewing it. But there's a difference between ego and all the 5 sheaths. The 5 sheaths are coverings. Ego is what identifies these 5 coverings as I. So ego isn't any of the 5 sheaths. The subtlest of the 3 subtlest sheaths are the Manomaya kosha, the Vijnanamaya kosha, and the Anandamaya kosha. These are three of the four antakaranas, inner instruments. The inner instruments are the manas, which is Manomaya kosha, buddhi, which is Vijnanamaya kosha, chittam, which is Anandamaya kosha, and ahande, which is not any of the koshas, it is that which takes all those koshas to be I. So of the antakaranas, the only one that is not a kosha is ego. But ego is what takes all the five koshas to be I. Have I answered your question fully, or was there more to it?
No, you have answered it, Michael. Thank you. Yeah.
So it's true in a sense, yes. What is it that the Vijnanamaya kosha means the intellect? What is it that is operating through the intellect? The intellect
Ego.
is a tool. Who is operating that tool? It is ego. Just like ego, so all the five sheaths are instruments used by ego. But ego is the driver, so to speak, and the other five sheaths are like the car that it is driving.
Sure. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
I think we have some questions. Next question is from Suresh Kumar. Is the Manolaya part of Prarabdha?
Yes. Yeah, I think you can say that because, well, one form of Manolaya that we experience every day is sleep. And that is certainly according to Prarabdha. So, yeah, I think we need not analyze these things. That is, when we analyze things, we need to analyze what is useful to analyze. So we can end up unnecessarily analyzing things. But I think, generally speaking, yes, we can say waking and dream are both governed by Prarabdha. Manolaya is neither waking nor dream, because waking and dream are states of mind. Manolaya is dissolution of mind, albeit just a temporary dissolution of mind. So yes, we can say it comes under the amount of time we spend in Manolaya is according to Prarabdha. But remember, time doesn't exist in Manolaya, because time is a product of the mind. So it's only from the perspective of the mind in waking or dream that we say that Manolaya has a certain duration. I slept soundly for 8 hours. That 8 hours, we didn't experience 8 hours while we were sleeping. While asleep, we are just aware I am. We're not aware of anything else. So there's no time or space or anything in sleep because there's no ego. So Manolaya is a state, being a state beyond mind, it's a state beyond all the beyond time and space. But from the perspective of ego in waking and dream, sleep seems to have a duration. Coma seems to have a duration. General anesthesia, which is another state of Manolaya, also seems to have a duration. Someone undergoes an operation and it is said, oh, they were under general anesthesia for 6 hours and it was a major operation. That's all. But those 6 hours are relative to the waking state. It's not experienced. If you have a major operation, you may be under general anesthesia for any number of hours. You're not at all aware of it because those hours are only from the perspective of ego, which exists only in waking and dream. So it's only after recovering from the general anesthesia, we're not aware of the passing of time. We're told you were out for we gave you general anesthesia at 10 o'clock this morning. It's now 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You've been out for 6 hours or something like that. So it's all relative. Likewise with Kevala Nivikalpa Samadhi, which is another state of Manolaya. Bhagavan told the story of a yogi who remained in Kevala Nivikalpa Samadhi for 300 years. That yogi wasn't experiencing 300 years. It's only from relative to this waking state that we can say, oh, he was in that state for 300 years. So since Manolaya is gaps between states of waking and dream, that is, the whole of our present life is one dream. Within this dream, we experience periods of sleep, and within that sleep we experience other dreams. So they're dreams within dreams, but the amount of time that is spent in Manolaya is from the perspective of ego in waking or dream. So in that sense, yes, we can say Manolaya is a part of Prarabdha, though we are not actually experiencing Prarabdha when we're in Manolaya, but that is gaps in the Prarabdha, we can say. Manolaya gaps, periods of rest within the experience of Prarabdha.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Right.
So we don't have any other questions, so I'll go ahead and ask one more question.
Okay.
So I have heard people saying that silence is the primary teaching of Bhagavan, and
Yes.
for people who cannot attain that state, we should do self-investigation. But isn't in order to attain the state of silence, shouldn't we start with investigation first? That's the
Yes,
question.
this is a misinterpretation that is very, very prevalent. When Bhagavan said that silence is the ultimate teaching, what he meant is the ultimate medium, so to speak, through which the truth is revealed is not words but silence. That doesn't mean that silence is what Bhagavan isn't teaching silence. Silence is his teaching. That is, silence is well, we need to understand what he means by silence. By silence, he doesn't mean, obviously, he doesn't mean vocal silence. He also doesn't mean mental silence, because mental silence, the mind is, the states of mind come and go. So a silent mind, it's a temporary state. That is not the silence Bhagavan is talking about. Bhagavan is talking about eternal silence. That eternal silence, that is the silence of pure being. That is, as he says in verse 24 of Ulladu, which I referred to earlier, he says, Satchit Udiyadu. So that pure being awareness does not rise. Since it doesn't rise, it's a state of perfect silence. Because all noise is rising. So the first noise is the rising of our self as ego. So silence is our being. Even when we rise as ego, even when we're in the midst of a battlefield or whatever, even when we're in the midst of all the samsara, all the chaos of samsara, we are eternally in silence. Silence is our real nature. It's our being. So that is the silence Bhagavan is talking about. He's not talking about a temporary quietening of the mind. He's talking about the eternal silence, the silence of pure being, the state in which there's no rising. And that is our real state even now. Though we seem to have risen now, we seem to have risen as ego, this rising is not our real identity. Our real identity is pure being, which is eternal silence. That is the silence Bhagavan is talking about. Since silence is what we actually are can be revealed only by what we actually are, which is silence. That is why silence is the ultimate teaching. The reason Bhagavan often said this is because words have their limits. Though Bhagavan gave us teaching in words, the words can never reveal the truth. The words can point us in the right direction. So Bhagavan's words are constantly pointing our attention back towards ourselves. So turning our attention back towards ourselves is absolutely essential. So we as you implied, we we return to our natural state of silence only by means of self-inquiry, Atma-vichara, self-investigation. So it's not like many people talk as if silence is the highest teaching and lower teaching is self-investigation, or they say self-investigation is only for those who don't understand silence or whatever it is. That's not understanding correctly. Silence is our real nature. Self-investigation is investigating our real nature, turning our attention back towards our being, which is eternal silence. So we can contact silence. We can listen to the teaching through silence, so to speak, only by attending to ourselves. So they're not two alternatives. Either you do silence or you do self-investigation. By turning our attention back towards ourselves, we thereby subside back into the silence of pure being, which is what we always actually are. Is that clear?
Yes, Michael, it is clear. Thank you.
Many people they talk about Bhagavan's teachings, even many very popular people who are very popular on YouTube and have thousands of followers and everything. They talk about Bhagavan's teaching, but it's clear from what they say that they really haven't understood. Their understanding is still at the level of words, but they haven't understood the deeper implication of those words. So they're misinterpreting Bhagavan's words.
Sure. Thank you, Michael. I think we have some questions. Yeah. Suresh Kumar again. So where can I buy Sadhu Om's Ramana Vali book from? I am in Tiruvannamalai now, and the ashram bookstore doesn't carry that book.
Yeah, the ashram, I think there's some reason why ashram cannot sell any books other than their own publication, because I think if they sell other publications, then they become a bookseller, which means they have to register. It's all to do with regulations and everything. So the best is to if you go to Sadhu Om's temple, his Samadhi temple, there, if you ask to meet Shankaran, I think Shankaran should be able to give you copies, should be able to sell you copies. Other than that, if anyone who's not in Tiruvannamalai can write to Arunachal Ramana Book Trust at gmail.com, I think it is. Anyway, there's a website, Arunachal Ramana Book Trust website. If you go there, the contact details are given there, and you can write and receive by post.
So I went to Sadhu Om's place. No one was there, so I was wondering.
Well, that's the thing. There's no. Sometimes people are there, sometimes they're not there. It's not a regular institution or anything like that. So best probably to go to the Arunachal Ramana Book Trust website, and there the email address is given. If you send an email, then there's a person, Narayan, who's managing the whole thing. He would send you a copy.
Right. Thank you, Michael.
Right.
I think you can go to, if you're there in the morning, between 7 and 7:30, there's somebody that comes to offer prayers to Sadhu Om Samadhi between 7 and 7:30.
Shiva Ramana comes and does puja there every morning. So if you ask him, he will be able to direct you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much.
The next question we have is from Hema. What is the contribution or the use of mind in the process of self-investigation? Does it help in getting the process started, or does self-investigation start when the mind subsides?
Okay. when we talk about mind, we need to understand what we're talking about. As Bhagavan says in verse 18 of Upadesha Undiyar, Enangale Manam, thoughts alone of a mind. Of all the thoughts, the root is the thought called I. In other words, ego. Therefore, what the mind essentially is ego. That's not exact translation, but that's the gist of it. That's what is implied. But the mind essentially is ego. That if we consider what Bhagavan is saying there, what he implies is mind. If we take mind in its broadest sense, it refers to all thoughts. All thoughts constitute the mind. But their thoughts fall into two categories. That is, one thought, the first thought, the root thought, is the thought I, in other words, ego. That is the subject, the knower. All other thoughts are objects, things known. So what the mind essentially is the knowing element of the mind. That is, the mind consists of two elements, the knower and everything that is known. So everything that is known is all the other thoughts. The first thought, the knower of all other thoughts, is ego. So what the mind essentially is ego. Sorry, can you just repeat the question? Oh, yes.
The question is, what is
the role of mind? So what is to investigate itself, what is to surrender itself, is only ego. So mind in the sense of ego is what is to surrender itself. And how does ego surrender itself? By fixing its attention on itself. And that's another meaning of the term mind. We often use the term mind in the sense of attention. Put your mind on the subject at hand. A teacher may, in the class, may say to a child, put your mind on on the lesson. But the child's mind is wandering about here and there, not paying attention. So we often use the word mind in the sense of attention. That is the sense in which Bhagavan uses the word mind when he defines what he means by Atma-vichara. In the 16th paragraph of Nana, he says, Sadakalamum manate atma-vilve tirupatakutan atma-vicharam endrupaya. That means the name Atma-vichara is only for always keeping the mind on oneself. Keeping the mind on oneself means keeping the attention on ourselves. So without the mind, we cannot do self-investigation. That is the definition given by Bhagavan. That is a very similar description is given by Sri Krishna in the Gita. He in chapter 6, verse 25, he says, Atma samstam manakritva na kinchitapi chintayet. Atma samstam manakritva means make the mind fixed on Atma or fixed in Atma. In other words, establish the mind, fix the mind on Atma, na kinchitapi chintayet. Do not think of anything else at all. That is one of the verses that Bhagavan has translated in Bhagavad Gita Saram. So Bhagavan's Tamil translation of that is Chittate anma vilse tiduka matredavum itanium ennidade. Chittate atma vilse tiduka. Join the mind to self join the mind in self. In other words, fix the mind on self. Matredavum ittineum enidade. Do not think even in the slightest of anything else at all. So mind in the sense of attention is the tool we use to know what we actually are. As mind, we cannot know what we actually are, but by turning our attention, our mind, back towards ourselves, we as ego or mind thereby subside and dissolve back into our being, and what then remains is the pure awareness that we actually are. So mind is absolutely essential in this path. If it wasn't for mind, there'd be no need to follow this path. But mind is the problem. The solution to that problem is to turn this mind, whose very nature is to be always going outwards, to turn it back within. And the nature of ego or mind, as Bhagavan makes clear in verse 25 of Ulluvanaptu, the nature of ego or mind is to rise, stand, and flourish by grasping form. Grasping form means attending to things other than itself. Because ego, he describes it as Uruvatra Payahande, the formless demon ego. So ego is formless because it's got no form of its own. Since it has no form of its own, it's got no separate existence. It seems to have a separate existence only by grasping form. So that's why he says in that verse, Urupatriundam, grasping form it comes into existence. That means not that by grasping form it comes into existence, as it's sometimes loosely translated, because it has to exist in order to grasp form. So what he means when he says Urupatriundam, as soon as we rise as ego, we grasp form. That is, our rising as ego and grasping form are simultaneous. And the first form we grasp is the form of a body that we take to be I. So he says, Urupatriundam, grasping form, it comes into existence. Urupatrinikam, grasping form, it stands. It stands means it endures. So we cannot rise as ego without projecting and identifying the form of a body as I. We cannot stand for a moment as ego without constantly holding on to this body as I. And then he goes on to say, Urupatri undu mika ongum, grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. That is, having grasped the form of a body as I, we don't stop with that. Then our attention goes outwards and it's constantly grasping other forms. Here, grasping means, it implies attending to or knowing. Because the ego is a formless phantom, so it hasn't got any hands or arms to grasp anything. It grasps in its awareness. In other words, it grasps by means of attention. So the implication is that the very nature of ego is to be always attending to forms, to things other than itself. And then he goes on to say, Uruvittu urupatram, leaving form it grasps form. Since it cannot stand for a moment without grasping form, if it leaves one form, it grasps another form. If it lets go of all forms together, it subsides in manolaya, in sleep. Then he says, this is the very important thing, Tedinal autem pidicum. Tedinal means if seeking. He doesn't say what is to seek what, but we have to understand from the context, what is to do the seeking is ego, and what it is to seek is its own reality. It's to seek to know who am I. So in other words, if ego, instead of grasping other things, if it tries to grasp itself to see who am I, if it turns its attention back on itself, autem pidicum, it takes flight, it runs away. Because ego cannot rise or stand without grasping form. If instead of grasping form, if it tries to grasp itself, since it is a formless demon, when it tries to grasp itself, it subsides because there's nothing to grasp. There's no form to grasp. So thereby it subsides and dissolves back into its source. So grasping is the very nature of ego. Ego is constantly grasping things other than itself. The means to get rid of ego is for ego to grasp itself. In other words, to turn its attention back towards itself. That's why he says, Sadakalmam manate atmavil veitirvatu. That alone, that keeping the mind constantly fixed on oneself, that alone is Atma-vichara. And that is what Krishna describes as Atma-samstam manakritva. That in the Bhagavad Gita, that occurs in chapter 6. Chapter 6 is supposed to be the chapter on yoga. It more or less, many of the verses more or less correspond to Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. But Patanjali's Yoga Sutra doesn't talk about fixing the mind on oneself. So Krishna indicates there what Bhagavan implies in Upadesha Undya in verses, particularly in verse 14 of Upadesha Undya, that the yoga can be brought to completion only by turning the attention back to ourselves. What Bhagavan says in Upadesha Undya, in verses 11 and 12, he explains that the mind and breath and life have a common source. So if you control the breath, if you subdue the breath, you thereby subdue the mind. And if you subdue the mind, you thereby subdue the breath. Therefore, breath control is a means to bring about the subsidence of mind. But as he makes clear in the 8th paragraph of Nana, it cannot bring about manonasa. It can only bring about, most it can bring about manolaya. So it's a tool for curbing the mental activity, but it cannot itself lead to a goal. So then in verse 13, he makes this important distinction between manolaya and manonasa. He says dissolution is of two kinds, implying dissolution of mind is of two kinds, laya and nasa. That which is in laya will rise again. That which is in nasa will not rise again. So there he clearly indicates manolaya is not our aim, because manolaya is only temporary. What we are aiming for is manonasa. So how to bring about manonasa? In verse 14, he says, the mind which will subside by controlling the breath will die only if it is sent on the or-vari. Or-vari implies aurum-vari, the investigating path, the path of self-investigation. It can also mean the one path, but the one path Bhagavan's talking about is obviously the path of self-investigation. So whether we take or to mean oru, one, or we take it to mean aurum, investigating, the implication is the same. So what Bhagavan clearly implies there is that only by sending the mind on the investigating path, in other words, by turning the mind back within to investigate who am I, will its form die. This is why in the chapter 6 in the Gita, Krishna includes this while talking about yoga. He's not strictly following Patanjali's yoga. He's going beyond Patanjali's yoga by, after talking about all this asana, pranayama and things like that, he says this mind has to be fixed in oneself. Because that is the only means to bring about the manonasa. Is that an adequate answer to that question? Have I answered it fully?
I think so, Michael. Thank you. And one follow-up question on that. So you were explaining about Upadesha Undya verses. Right?
Yeah.
So some people take that to be like steps. For example, like as you said, there are two ways to subside the mind, laya and nasa. And then people take that we have to first practice that breath control in order to subside the mind. With that one pointed mind, we should turn back. So they take it as a prerequisite for self-investigation, but that's not the case, right? We can directly do self-investigation without. Can you clarify more? Yeah.
Those who think that we need to do pranayama in order to practice self-investigation, what is the benefit of pranayama? It's a means to bring about the calming of the mind. If you take pranayama too far, you'll end up in laya, which is no use, because when you're in laya, you can't do any sadhana at all. So if you want to make use of pranayama, you can use it to calm the mind and then turn the mind within. But is that necessary? Obviously not, because the most effective means to bring about the subsidence of the mind is self-investigation. In the 8th paragraph of Nana, Bhagavan begins by saying, he said very clearly, Manam adanguvadaku vicharanaye tavira vera tahanta upayangalile. If to make the mind subside or dissolve, except vichara, there's no other adequate means. If and he goes on to say, if made to subside by other means, it will remain as if subsided, but it will rise again. In other words, it can only take you as far as Manolaya. And then he goes on to talk about pranayama and everything. So the most effective way to calm the mind, to bring about the subsidence of the mind, is self-investigation. So we don't need to practice we don't need to practice pranayama in order to calm down the mind, in order to turn it within. The most effective way to calm down the mind is to turn it within. So pranayama is not at all necessary. The reason it's prescribed for some people who have a very strong sense of doership, they want to do something, but their minds are not yet subtle enough to understand that all they need to do is to turn the attention back within. So this Patanjali's, the 8 limbs of yoga prescribed by Patanjali, that's why they're prescribed. But also another thing to bear in mind, Patanjali's Yoga Sutra are based on a different philosophy. They're based on the philosophy of Sankhya, which is a dualistic philosophy. It's dualistic because it thinks there are 2 realities, Purusha and Prakriti. So we as awareness are Purusha. Everything else, all phenomena are Prakriti. So we have to, as Purusha, we have to isolate ourselves from Prakriti. We have to try to attain Kaivalya. Kaivalya means a state of isolation or of solitude, separating ourselves from everything else. But if we separate ourselves from everything else every night when we fall asleep. That's only a temporary solution. In order to separate ourselves permanently, we need to investigate what we are. And if we investigate what we are, then we will find out that there's no Prakriti independent of our perception of it. That is, Prakriti means all phenomena. There's no phenomena independent of ego. So as Bhagavan says, Handayundayan anatamundahum. If ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. Ahandaindrail indru anatam. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. So this the path of self-investigation is based on a much deeper philosophy than the path of Raja Yoga. So Raja Yoga, it's suitable for those who are attracted to that type of doing path. They want to do something in order to do nothing. The aim is to do nothing, but in order, what do I do to do nothing? So they are given all these 8-fold limbs to do. Bhagavan has given us a very simple thing, what we have to do nothing. Attend to yourself. If you attend to yourself, you'll subside. So all the benefits of Raja Yoga, or Patanjali's yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, are achieved simply by self-attentiveness. And if we do self-attentiveness, then none of this Patanjali's yoga is necessary. So yes, you're right. It's not a step-by-step process that we have to do. We have to follow Patanjali's 8-fold limbs before we can come to this path. The fact that we've been drawn to Bhagavan, the fact that we've been drawn to his path of self-investigation, means all the yoga and other practices that may have been necessary in the past, we've done all those and found their limitation, and that's why we are now looking for something deeper. So having come to Bhagavan, we don't have to worry about any other path. But isn't bhakti necessary? Yes, bhakti is absolutely essential, but what is the pinnacle of bhakti? Attending to ourself. Because attending to ourself is surrendering to ourself. Because to the extent to which we attend to ourself, we thereby subside. So as Bhagavan says in the 13th paragraph of Nana, he defines what is surrender. Anma chintane tavira, vera chintane kalambavataku, satram idam kodamo, Atmanishta paranai irpade, tanai isanaku alipadam. That means being as Atmanishta param, being one who is firmly fixed as oneself. In other words, being as we actually are is giving ourselves to God. How to be as we actually are? He says in the first clause, Anma chintane tavira, vera chintane kalambavatu satram idam kadamo. Not giving the slightest room to rising of any other thought except Atma-chintana. Atma-chintana literally means self-thought, but it implies self-attentiveness. So the implication is, if we attend to ourselves so keenly, but we thereby give no room to the rising of any other thought, we will thereby subside and remain as Atmanishta Param, and that is giving ourselves to God. So this is the path of Atma-vichara is not an alternative to the path of bhakti, it is the pinnacle of the path of bhakti. All other bhakti practices ultimately lead to this practice. As Bhagavan makes clear in verse 8 of Upadesha Undiyar, where he says, Anya bhavatin avanahamahum ananya bhavame undi para anatimnam uttamam undi para. Anya bhavam means meditation on what is other. In the context it implies meditating on God as something other than ourselves. In other words, meditating on God in name and form, as if he was something other than ourselves. So rather than that, ananya bhava, meditation on what is not other, meaning what is not other than ourselves. In other words, meditation on ourself alone, avanahamaham, in which he is I. That is, when we understand that God is that which is shining in our heart as I, what is the best way to meditate on God? To meditate on nothing other than I. That is what Bhagavan means by avanahamaham ananya bhavam. And that, he says, that alone is anatinam uttamam. That is best among all. So this is the pinnacle of the path of bhakti. Why is it the pinnacle of the path of bhakti? Because as he explains in the next verse, verse 9, Bhava Balatinal, by the strength of meditation, that implies by the strength of that Ananya Bhava, by the strength of self-attentiveness, Bhavanatita Satbhava Tirutale, being in Satbhava, being in the state of being which transcends bhavana, which transcends all meditation in the form of mental activity, that is Parabhakti Tattva, that is the very nature of supreme devotion. So this path of Atma-vichara, this is the pinnacle of the path of bhakti. It's also the culmination of, if you want to follow the path of yoga, eventually, in order to reach the goal, you have to come to this path of self-investigation. Because as Bhagavan makes clear in verse 14, the mind will die only if it is sent on this aurum vari, this path of investigation. Is that a clear answer?
Yes, Michael. Thank you. I think we have a question from Sridhar. Sridhar, please go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, Michael. Namaskaram.
Namaskaram.
This question has been asked by many people at many times who visit Bhagavan. Yeah. It has also been asked. So let me give you a little context to the question. So the question is, I am here and now every day with a long list of responsibilities and duties. I start my day recognizing that I'm simply executing his will and go about my day with all the vasanas in full force. I cannot outrun what is already landed at my feet. I may inadvertently even take on more. Before I go to sleep, I give it all up. That's the background every day.
Yeah.
This is what's happening.
Yeah.
So from the practical realities of where I am, and I'm sure many other householders who are here with you today and who think about just
whether we're
what are the
householder
things?
or sannyasi, we're all in the same boat.
So my question is just this. What are the things I can do very in a practical way that I can do to further me along this path? Because I spend my day with blips of recognizing and turning inwards, but I spend majority of my day doing what is landed at my feet, except at the end points, at the beginning, at the end.
Yeah.
So that is my question, Michael.
Okay. The best thing you can do is, as much as possible, within the midst of all these other activities, turning your attention back towards yourself. Because whatever you may be doing, you never cease to be aware, I am doing this. I am working hard. I have got these responsibilities. But that awareness, I am, the awareness of our being, is the background for all other experiences. So nothing can happen except on the screen of this fundamental awareness, I am. So rather than attending to the picture on the screen, we should try to attend to the screen. That's, of course, very subtle, because if you're looking at a screen with pictures on it, our attention keeps on being diverted by the pictures that are on the screen. But just forget about the pictures. Try to be aware of that background screen. In other words, let anything happen. Let any responsibilities be there. Let any actions happen. Let anything happen. None of these can happen except on the background, except on the screen of this awareness, I am. So let's try and hold on to that awareness, I am, as much as possible. The more we do this, the more we will find that actually it is not necessary to attend to anything else at all, because everything is going on according to prarabdha. And whatever actions of mind, speech, and body we need to do in order for our prarabdha to unfold, we will be made to do. This is what Bhagavan says in the first sentence, what Bhagavan implies in the first sentence of the note he wrote for his mother. Avarava prarabdha prakaram adakanavan angangirandu atuvipan. That is, in accordance with the prarabdha of each one, he who is for that, meaning God or Guru, angangirandu, being there, being in each place, that implies being in the heart of each one of us, atuvipan, he will make us act. So he will make our mind, speech, and body act in accordance with prarabdha. That doesn't mean all the actions of mind, speech, and body are in accordance with prarabdha, because most of our actions we do under the sway of our vasanas. But whatever actions we do under the sway of our vasanas is not going to change one iota what is going to happen, because what is going to happen is already predetermined. So as Bhagavan said, goes on to say in that note, Endrum naduvadadu, envichikanam naduvadu. What is never to happen will not happen in spite of any amount of effort. That implies what is going to happen is going to happen. That doesn't mean we don't have freedom to will and act. We have freedom to will and act, but however much we may want what is not destined to happen, however much we may try for what is not destined to happen, it is not going to happen. And then he goes on to say the other side of the flip side of the same thing, nadapadu entade seyanam niladu. What is to happen will not stop in spite of any amount of obstacle. So what is going to happen is prarabdha. Nothing is going to happen except what is destined to happen. So whatever effort we make either to experience what is not destined to happen or to avoid what is destined to happen, it's not going to change things an iota. So this is where people who think there's a contradiction between fate and freedom of will have failed to understand correctly. That is, fate determines what we are to experience. In other words, fate means prarabdha. Prarabdha determines what we are given to experience. Our freedom of will and action determines what we want to happen and what we try to make happen. But that doesn't change for that doesn't make any difference. Only what is destined to happen is going to happen. And then Bhagavan goes on to say, Iduve tinnam, this is certain. Ahalin monamayirake nandru. Therefore, being silent is good. How to be silent? Silence is our very nature. Silence is our being. So being silent means holding on to our being. Let anything happen. Our only concern should be to hold on to our being, hold on to this fundamental awareness, I am, the awareness of being. If we hold on to that, everything is going to happen in accordance with prarabdha, as it would happen even if our mind were going outward. So it makes no difference to what is going to happen, whether we're constantly seeking things outside or whether we turn our attention within. So the more we follow this path, the more it will become clear to us that our outwardly directed efforts are making no difference whatsoever. Things are going to happen as they're going to happen. Nothing is going to change in any way. So there's no need for us to attend to anything other than ourselves. As Bhagavan says in the 13th paragraph of Nana, after that first sentence, when he defines what is giving oneself to God, he then goes on to say, however much burden one places on God, he will bear all of it. That implies, in the context, even the burden of thinking we can leave to God. Because everything's going to happen according to prarabdha anyway. So he will make things happen as they're meant to happen. So we don't even have to think that I have to think this, I have to do this, and so on and so forth. Then he goes on to say, when that one Parameshwara Shakti is driving all karyas, and in this context, karyas means everything that is meant to happen, everything that we're meant to do, everything is being driven by that one Parameshwara Shakti. When such is the case, why should we, instead of yielding ourselves to it, be constantly thinking, Ipadiseya vendum, apadiseya vendum. It's necessary to do like this, it's necessary to do like that. We can all thought about what needs to be done, leave it to God. He will take care of everything. And then he gives that beautiful analogy of the passenger on the train. When you're traveling on a train, the train is carrying all the burdens. So why to suffer unnecessarily carrying our luggage on our head instead of putting it aside and traveling happily? So surrender is leaving aside all thought, all concerns about our outward life. Let Bhagavan take care of that. Our only duty is to surrender ourselves to him and thereby travel happily on this the train of this life. Everything will be, however much burden we put on him, he will bear all of it. So, but we can understand that by reading it and thinking it, but it doesn't really sink in. We still, even though we, at the superficial level, we may think we've understood this, still we go on thinking that as if everything depends on us. I have these responsibilities. I've got to pay the bills, pay the rent. I've got this job. It's got so many responsibilities. I've got wife, husband, children, parents, all these, so many responsibilities I've got. We take all these things on our head. Instead of leaving it all, Bhagavan will take care of, Bhagavan can take care of our elderly parents, our husband or wife, our children, much better than we can. So leave it all to him. Our only duty is Atma chintane tavira vera chintane kalambavatuku satram idam kadamo. Not giving even the slightest room to rising of any thought other than thought of oneself. In other words, other than self-attentiveness. That that very, very important teaching, it will really sink home only to the extent to which we put this into practice. So your answer is, what can we do? All we can do, to the extent possible, try to attend to your own being. Try to attend to I as much as possible. Everything else will slowly, slowly drop off. There's nothing more than this. There's nothing any of us can do. This is the royal remedy that Bhagavan has given us. So simple. All we have to do is to attend to ourselves. But though it's so simple, in practice, because we have such strong vasanas, such strong Vishaya vasanas, such strong inclination to be constantly attending to things other than ourselves, it seems to us very difficult. It seems to be difficult because we are not willing to remain attending to ourselves without attending to anything else. Atma samstam mana kritva na kinchitapi chintayat. Fix the mind on yourself and do not think of anything else. Anma chintane tavira vera chintane kalambataku satram idam kadamo. Not giving even the slightest room to the rising of any thought other than Atma chintana. So what Krishna says in Gita is exactly what Bhagavan is saying. Only thing in Gita, it's among so many other verses, because Gita has something for everyone. So the very highest teachings are there, and also all other teachings to suit people at different levels of spiritual development. Whereas in Bhagavan teachings, it's focused on this ultimate. But this is all we need to do. Is that a satisfactory answer to your question?
Yes, Michael. What I've understood is go along for the ride, but be aware of the ride and focus on.
Don't be aware of the ride. Be aware of who is riding.
Who's riding?
Yeah. The more you focus on your own being, the less the ride will have any impact on you.
Thank you, Michael.
Well, this is the essence of Bhagavan's teaching. This is the essence of Vedanta, the essence of all true spiritual teachings. It's so simple, but it requires supreme love to put it into practice. And we are all lacking that love, but how to cultivate that love? Again, the same answer. It's only by trying as much as possible to attend to ourselves, this love to attend to ourselves will be cultivated. And this is Parabhakti Tattva.
And Bhagavan guarantees that. That's the beauty of it.
Yes. But he guarantees, in the 12th paragraph, the previous paragraph of Nana, he said, just like the jaws, the prey that is in the jaws of a tiger cannot escape, those who have been caught in the glance of Guru's grace will surely be saved and never forsaken. Eninum Guru Katya Varipadi Tavarada Nadakavendam. Nevertheless, it is necessary to follow without fail in accordance with the path shown by Guru. So Bhagavan gives us an assurance and simultaneously gives us a caution. He will do everything for us, but we have to do our little part. We have to surrender. He will do everything else. But if we don't surrender, he's not going to force us. So all we have to do is to lay the burden at his feet. How do we lay the burden at his feet? By holding on to him in our heart, where he's ever shining as I. That is the way to surrender ourselves completely to him.
Thank you, Michael. I think next is a comment from Eric, the flashing point is the I am. It exists simply and it is always okay and it is always is. Coming back to the anchor sinking within, it must be seen by love. The ego seems to want both, but in reality, the bottom of the ocean is not aware of its wave. They have no relation in between each other, cause only the substance is real. Wave just seem to have rising.
Yeah. The substance is our own being. That's what we need to hold on to.
I think
The
Suresh wants...
wave is not the ocean, and the ocean is not the wave. But both the wave and the ocean are water. That water is our being. That is what is shining in our heart as I. That is what we need to hold on to.
Sure. Thank you, Michael. Suresh wants to add his email ID to paramount importance of self-attention email list. I don't know what that is, Michael.
Okay. No, there's some, the paramount importance, it's a series of articles that have been going on for a very long time in the Mountain Path. Yeah, if you
Yeah, I can send his email ID
if you
to
give
you.
him my email address and he can write to me and I can send.
Sure. Okay.
Are you going to publish a book about that, Michael?
If it is Bhagavan's will, it may happen. It's still, the series is going on in Mountain Path. It may come to an end sometime within the next few years. I'm not sure. Once it comes to an end, then I may revise it to some extent, and then it may come out as a book. But that's all in Bhagavan's hands. Who knows what Bhagavan's plans are?
Thank you so much for your contribution. He is shining through you for all of us.
Well, he's shining in each and every one of us. That's what we have to remember. That's what's important. We cannot find him outside ourselves. So everything outside just points, that his teachings are constantly pointing us back within.
Thank you.
When Janaki Mata fell at Bhagavan's feet and was holding Bhagavan's feet, he looked down at her and asked her what she's doing. She said, I'm holding the feet of my guru. And he said, this body is perishable, these feet are perishable. If you take this form to be the form of your guru, you will be disappointed. The real form of the guru, of your guru, the real feet of the guru is shining in your heart as I. Hold on to those feet, they alone will save you. So what we have to understand from that is that the outward form of guru, the function of the outward form of guru is to turn us within. So Bhagavan doesn't say, come to me, I will save you. Bhagavan says, go to you, turn within, and see that you are already saved, eternally saved.
Thank you, Michael. I think that is the end of the questions, but I do have one more question.
Right.
So you have explained that to do self-investigation, there is no posture required. We don't have to close our eyes. We can even do it with open eyes.
Yes.
In Sadhu Om's Dhyana part, the first verse he says is Kannai Moodi Amarthukolla. So how to, what is the implied meaning there? I understand it's not literal meaning.
Okay.
What is it?
Kannai Moodi Amarthukolla, that's a beautiful song. It was written primarily for children. But the meaning is very, very deep. So it starts with the simplest idea that everyone has of meditation. What is meditation? We have to sit down, close our eyes, and think of God. That's the usual understanding that we all have about meditation. And then from that, he leads us step by step by step by step to, I'm just trying to remember some of the verses. Sorry, I can't remember now the verse, but he says, God exists within you as the witness of all your thoughts. Where all the thoughts subside, there God shines forth. Enna Mariam Sakshiyai, Irevan Onnul Irikirai. Ennum Oinda iditile irevam vandu tondruva. That verse. And then he says, Ennum oya varie kel, irevan ramanam morie kel. How to bring about the subsidence of all thoughts? Listen to the words of Irevan Ramana, Lord Ramana, that God in the form of Ramana. Ennamoya Variekel, Irevan Ramana Moriekel, Ennum erumbum taraname, Yar Keri Dendrupa. I'd say each thought arises, see to whom it rises. So he's leading from the simplest understanding of meditation deeper and deeper and deeper. Paka paka unnule paramanyana pukume. Paka marive pakave pari pari vetrikol. That's some beautiful verses. Parka marive pakave. See the seeing awareness. Paramanyana pukume, the supreme knowledge will shine forth. Parka parka unule, parka parka. Oh yeah, look within, and the supreme jnana will shine forth. Parka marive parkave, pari pari vetrikol. To practice and practice to achieve success. So though it was written for children, the whole of Bhagavan's teachings is encapsulated in that song. It's such a beautiful song.
Thank you, Michael. I didn't know that it was written for children. It was so profound and it has everything in it, like
yes.
Complete.
Yes.
Thank you. I think we have one more comment from Eric. Understanding is only to know what to surrender, like in the analogy of the soldier, that be willing to surrender the gun instead of the pen.
Yeah, that's an analogy Sadhu Om gave. That is, how if a soldier is told is captured by the enemy, and the enemy says surrender your gun, if the soldier doesn't understand that language, he doesn't know what he's asked to surrender, so he surrendered his pen. But he doesn't know what is in that language, what is the word for gun. He doesn't recognize it. He thinks it's a pen. So we cannot surrender ourselves without knowing ourselves. How can you surrender something that you don't know? So Sadhu Om uses that analogy to say surrender cannot be complete without knowing who we are. Because we have to know what we're surrendering before we can surrender it.
Is that an intellectual process, Michael?
No. How can an intellectual process enable us to know what we are? The intellect is the power of discernment. But usually we use our intellect is directed outward to discern one thing from another. The intellect is necessary in order to distinguish ourself as the knower from everything that is known. So that is the subtlest use of the intellect, to distinguish ourselves. In a certain sense, we are using the intellect even in this process of self-investigation, but not intellect not the outward-facing intellect, the inward-facing intellect. But it's far more than just the intellect. It's our whole attention needs to be turned back within. Simply by reasoning all these things, of course we need to have an understanding, so we need to reason, but we are not this, we need to understand why we cannot be this body or mind or anything. We need to understand all that. But we then need to put that understanding into practice by fixing our attention not on anything that is known, but only on the knower.
Beautiful. Thanks.
Bhagavan talks about nun matiyal in verse 23 of Uludunabdu. Nun matiyal means by very subtle intellect. What he means by that is that we need to distinguish ourselves from everything else. We need to distinguish the knower from everything that is known. And again in verse 28, he uses the term kunda matiyal, a very sharp, keen intellect. But this isn't the outward-facing intellect. Some people are brilliant. They're brilliant mathematicians, brilliant scientists, brilliant philosophers. But if you try to explain this path of self-investigation, it just won't. They won't understand what we're talking about because they lack that. Though their intellect is very well sharpened for understanding external things, it lacks the subtlety to distinguish the knower from everything that is known. So there are different types of intellect. There's something called IQ, intellect quotient. They measure people's intelligence. That is meaningless because different types of intelligence are needed for different things. So a person can have a very good intelligence. A person may be a brilliant mathematician, for example, but not be very good at some other things. So intelligence is a tool. What we use that tool for is up to us. So if we are following this path of self-investigation, we're using our intelligence to distinguish ourselves from everything else and to hold on to ourselves alone. But this requires this requires a certain degree of purity of mind. So long as the mind is clouded by many vasanas, the intellect will lack the subtlety and clarity to make this distinction. They won't even recognize the importance of making this distinction.
Yes. Personally, I learned this is not the intellectual task where we can do multitasking. It's 100% focus on this.
Oh, yeah, yes, definitely, definitely. And it doesn't require a very brilliant intellect. We don't have to be a Nobel Prize winning nuclear physicist or a brilliant mathematician or anything. We simply need to have that clarity to distinguish ourselves from everything else and to hold on to ourselves. So we don't need a lot of learning. We don't need a lot of, all we need is that inner clarity. Beautiful. And that inner clarity comes from grace, which is ever shining in our heart as eye, but we are influenced by grace only to the extent to which we subside back within. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa used a beautiful analogy. He said, grace is like the monsoon rain. It's constantly pouring down. And there's not any place on the land but it doesn't fall. But if it lands on a mound, it all runs off. If it lands in a low-lying place, it accumulates. So to the extent to which we subside, we thereby imbibe the grace. To the extent to which we rise as a proud intellect, I have understood all these things, I know this, I know that. So long as that ego rises, we are like the mound of which all the water of grace goes running off. So Bhagavan's path is all about subsiding, subsiding, subsiding. The more we subside into the heart, the more clarity we will get. Because all clarity, that is the source of all clarity, is from within the heart. That means from within the very center of our self.
Thank you, Mike. I think there's one more comment from Eric. Intransitive awareness. I think, like Bhagavan says in Ulladunarpad, the difference, awareness of other things.
Yeah.
I think that is the end of all questions for today.
Okay.
Any other questions, anyone? If not, okay. Thank you so much,
Okay,
Michael, for your
thank
time.
you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.